Hey there, I'm going to walk you through a little project from a pretty advanced set of materials called Develop in Swift Data Collections. You might be familiar with Develop in Swift. There's the Explorations book, there's the Fundamentals book. They're all available for free from the Books application. This is Explorations, aimed at folks who've never coded before, or maybe just want to start from scratch. A lot of hands-on projects for them to get their teeth sunk into. Fundamentals is for folks who are studying computer science and know this is what I want to do. I want to be a coder for my career, and Fundamentals will give you a great head start on becoming a full-fledged professional coder. The follow-on from both of those materials, when you're ready to take that next leap and you're going to go a bit deeper into other more advanced concepts in app development with Swift, is data collections. And in data collections, there's a really fun set of projects in Unit 2 where we learn, this of course is developing Swift fundamentals, in data collections. This is where we, in Unit 2, learn about working with the web, something we all do from our apps. We're always reaching out and connecting to other sources of information. And there's a great project in here called the NASA Astronomy Picture of the Day. So what we do is we connect to this API and we get taught how to use some key Swift features to be able to decode JSON responses. That's the format that the data is coming from on the NASA website. And it's just an easy format for us to be able to read and understand and say, okay, cool. Now I know what the title of this photo is. I know what the description is. I know what the copyright is. And I know where to get the actual image data so I can display that in an app of my own. So Develop in Swift, the whole series works with UIKit a lot, which is a long-standing user interface framework from Apple that's been around for ages. And of course, the new hotness is SwiftUI, which you may have heard about. And what I'm going to do in this project is I'm going to walk you through building out a NASA Photo of the Day app in SwiftUI and taking advantage of some of the brand new features in SwiftUI that make it so easy to build stuff like this. So let's go take a look.
So the tool we're going to use to build this app is called Swift Playgrounds 4 on our iPad. This is going to show us the power of the new Swift Playgrounds 4 and the ability it gives us to build apps from scratch all the way to shipping them to the App Store. This is a huge tool for us to use if we're on the go, if we're sitting in a classroom. A really great way to build some apps. So let's get started by creating an app. So first things first, we tap on the app icon down in the lower left-hand corner, Swift Playgrounds. And we can tap on the text for our app name to rename it. So we'll give it a good name for our project. Once we've done that, we'll tap on the playground itself and open it up and see our brand new app from scratch. We can tap on the app settings icon over on the left there to give it a new icon, to play around with the custom colors. We'll choose the stars for our NASA Photo of the Day app. And if we tap on the icon in the upper right-hand corner, that'll bring up the app preview. Now we haven't written any code yet to define the user interface, but this is where we'll see our user interface when we get going. Now, first things first, we want to work on the model. So I'm going to create a file called photo info by tapping on that plus file button over there, over the sidebar. We're going to create a structure with a couple properties. Now this is going to be the structure of the data that we get back from the NASA Astronomy Photo of the Day API. It's going to include things like a title, description, a URL for the photo that we're going to display. And now we know about these things because we've gone to the link in the description in the data collections project that explains a bit of what the Astronomy Photo of the Day API provides. We have these things called coding keys. It's going to help us decode this stuff automatically. So just by defining these properties that we expect to see inside the response from the NASA server, Swift will do all the hard work for us of turning that response and that text into an actual object that we can use inside of our code. Now we use coding keys for things like mismatches between the property name we want to use. In this example, we want to use description. And on the NASA API side, they decided to call it explanation. So we wanted to make that a little bit more custom to our app. We're also, as instructed in the Develop in Swift Data Collections lesson, we're going to create this photo info error so we can get a little bit more insight into what exactly went wrong. Did we have an issue fetching the actual data from NASA? Was the photo missing when we tried to fetch the photo from the URL in the API? We've got some errors that we're going to go back and address. And one of the first places we're going to look is at that enumeration, because we have a small typo. So we take away that S from coding keys, because we want to make it conform to the coding key protocol, not the coding keys enumeration that we're just defining. And now we're good to go. We then follow the same steps for creating a photo info controller file that we did for creating photo info. This one's going to be a class. We're going to call it photo info controller. This is from the Develop in Swift Data Collections book. So if you want to go understand the reason why and what we're doing, there's some great explanations there. Now we have a little addition of this computed property, this date formatter computed property, because this is going to be something we're going to use later when we try to add some extra features to our photo app of the day. But we're going to create a function on our photo info controller called fetch photo info for, then we can pass in a date, or if we don't pass in a date, we'll use today's date as the default. It's going to be an asynchronous function. And if you don't know what that means, there's no panic. It's all explained in data collections, but we can kind of just work with it as it is. It's one of those things that we can learn more about later. So you can see right here, I've got a typo straight away. I can even struggle saying it. Let date strong. That's going to come back to bite us a little bit later, but that's okay. We'll fix that bug when we get to it. We'll type out our URL. Now again, we know this not just because it's magically come to us, but because we've gone to the NASA Astronomy Photo of the Day API website, where they've got a lot of documentation about what to expect when you visit this URL, and also what you need to pass it in terms of the date and an API key. That's something we'll see in a lot of application programming interfaces we deal with. They require some kind of key just to show that you're a valid user and authorized to use this API. Again, all of this code is explained in Develop in Swift Data Collection, so we won't go into it in too much depth here. Now, if you're trying to type along, we have a GitHub repository with all of this code already implemented. So you can go copy and paste from there if you want to make your life a little bit easier. Or if you want to try to fully type it out too, there's no harm in that. You may run into the same issue that we'll see in a little bit with my date strong typo. Here we can see the moment where I realize my typo. So I want to go back and fix that because I'd prefer my code to be pretty clean and pretty readable. So I just go back and fix the date string as well as where I referred to it when I'm passing it over to the API. Again, we're looking at some fairly advanced features. So if this is all a bit intimidating, there's no need to panic. By the time you get to this stage in developing Swift data collections, you've gone through all of developing Swift fundamentals and you've learned about collections, you've learned about functions, structures, lots of the ins and outs of all of these things. So it's going to make a lot more sense. And in fact, even in the Unit 2, where we talk about working with the web in data collections, we learn a lot about some of these techniques that we're using here. So that first chunk of code that we've seen was all about setting up our request. So what URL are we going to hit to go get a response? And now we're writing the code where we actually deal with the response. Because we've done the work to create that photo info struct, now we can just tell our JSON decoder to use that to turn the response that we get from the web server into something we can use in our app, like proper Swift code. So you might have noticed that we have a red X in the upper right-hand corner there. That means we have a build error somewhere in our project. And it's up here in our date formatter property. Now, I mentioned before that we made this a computed property, and that's actually a mistake. We want this to be just a regular old property, a regular old variable that we can assign a value to. So we can do a bit of work to create a date formatter and configure it, and then assign the result to this date formatter property. So we're actually missing our assignment piece. So we need to go fix that. Because otherwise that consecutive declarations on a line must be separated by a comma is not super helpful. Now that we've built the brains of our application, we're going to go back to our content view where we're going to build the look and feel of our application. When I go back to the content view, I like to tap on that icon in the upper right corner to show the app preview. And what we need is photo info. And that's going to be stateful. That's going to change for us. So we want to make sure we mark it with that @state declaration. We're also going to make it optional. We may or may not have a photo info. And we're going to handle that when we write our user interface down here. So inside of VStack, which is just a vertical stack of visual elements, we're going to create a few pieces of text that'll use properties on our photo info, like the title. That double question mark just means that if there's no value, if there's no photo info, we'll just display text that says there's no image yet. We'll style that text a little bit. And we'll display a few other things as well. We want to display maybe the description of the image and the copyright to make sure the right people get credit. We're making good use of the autocomplete bar so that we get that question mark after photo info inserted for us. So Swift is trying to keep us safe. And for the description, instead of saying no description yet and no image yet and repeating that over and over again, I'm just going to use an empty string so that we just get the big no image yet and the empty string in our display. Now we have to hook it up so that we load the photo info, because if we leave it like this, we'll never have any photo info. So we're going to use this modifier called a task modifier on our VStack, which will fill our photo info property with the results of calling that fetch photo info on photo info controller. Now we have to add a few keywords like try with a question mark because it might fail. Await, which means that this is going off and happening in another thread so that the user interface can update and people can interact with our app while the photo info is being fetched. But now our app should start to come to life a little bit. Now it should have showed up in the preview, but let's launch the app and try to see what's going on. We should get some info about the photo of the day. Still nothing. So we've definitely got a bug in our app and we have to go have a look. Now, this code looks fine. So we probably want to go check out our photo info controller. That's the thing actually making the request. And we're going to find another little bug that I left in the code. So if we go have a look at the request that we're building, we can see that we typed in api.nasa.give when it's NASA, api.nasa.gov. So if we go back to content view, in the preview already, we can see that this is acting the way we expect it to. It's pulling down the photo info from the app of the day or from the photo of the day. Now we'll style the rest of our text a little bit now that we have our info and we can see it. Let's push the copyright info over a little bit by using a H-stack and a spacer. Clean things up a little bit. Now we're going to add an image because this is all about photos. So we're going to use something called an AsyncImage. And this is new in SwiftUI. And as we start typing, again, we have that handy autocomplete available to us. And what we do is we give it a URL for the image so it can go off and load it. And we're also going to use the version of AsyncImage that handles the different phases of an asynchronous image's lifecycle. So the first thing we're going to check to see is if the phase has an image available in it. If it does, that means that we've been able to fetch the image from over the internet and we can display it. We're going to make sure that the image is resizable. And we can just accept the defaults. The other case we want to check is if there was an error in the phase. Maybe we weren't connected to the internet or the image wasn't found. In that case, we're going to display a system image, just the exclamation mark. So we let people know that we had an issue fetching the image for that day. And the last thing we're going to do is that if it's in any other case, any other phase, we're going to display a progress view. Now we have to fix one last thing before our preview updates and should show us an image. We've got an error in that AsyncImage declaration where we just have to tell it that, hey, the photo info may or may not exist. And we have our image. Now that we have our image, we can see our description gets a little bit truncated. So we want to insert that into a scroll view, fix our user interface there. So we'll drag in the photo info.description. And now when we have the photo, we also have a scroll view over in the preview that we'll be able to scroll up and down, and so we can see the whole description. Now we're going to hit that play button up top in the middle of our screen and update and show the app. And it looks okay, a bit stretched, but we'll fix that in a little bit. So to fix that issue with our image looking a little bit stretched when we put it on an iPad, we're going to add a new property to our image inside AsyncImage. So we'll put the dot there. We'll use scale to fit. And I'd also like to make it look a little bit nicer than just that hard edge rectangle. We're all into our soft corners these days, so I'm going to add a quarter radius to my async image. Now we can play around with this value, but I'm going to give it a 10. And we're good to go. We have a look, and oh, that's looking much more polished. If we try it out in our app, that looks much better. In fact, it even looks good when we rotate the iPad. Our app looks pretty good, but I'd love to add one more feature that lets us pick a photo from any day over the last little while instead of just the one from today. So that's what we're going to do next. We'll start out by building the user interface for it. So we'll add a H stack below the copyright. And we use a thing called the date picker. And there are lots of ways that we can create a date picker to display it in the user interface. What we're going to do is use the version that where we provide a title, so a date in this case, where we provide the selection, so when someone taps on the date picker, that's going to be populated with the date they picked. Now we haven't written that property just yet, but we'll call it photo date. We use the one where you specify a range of dates, because we don't want to specify all dates, because the NASA Photo of the Day API hasn't been around for all the time. We want to calculate the number of seconds, so that's going to be our time interval, for the last 100 days or so. So we'll do a little bit of math there, multiply 60 by 60 by 24, and then multiply by 100 for the number of days that we want to go back in the past for. And to create a date range, we just use 3 dots between the 2 dates. So the earlier date and then today's date. And we only want to display the date component, not the time. So that's our date picker. I was complaining a little bit because we don't have that photo date property just yet, but we're going to create that in a second. We're also going to have a button. So when someone taps on the button, that's going to go off and fetch the photo for that particular date that we've selected. So the action comes first. The label that we'll give it is just a piece of text that says fetch photo. And we'll do the same steps that we took in the task when we first loaded the page. And we'll say photo info is going to be populated with the results of our try, await, photo info controller, fetch info data. And this time we can pass in an actual date. I've got an error here that's kind of bugging me. So let's go delete one of these parentheses because I've gotten a bit too excited with the parentheses there for our date range. We'll delete that just so we can get some of our autocomplete functionality back. Like, for example, when we type in fetch photo info. I'll type in photo date because that's the name of the property that we're gonna create. We haven't yet. In fact, let's go do that now. Now this is something that changes and is owned by this SwiftUI view, so we'll use @state. And we'll declare a a photo date. It's going to be of type date. And by default, we're going to assign it a value of today's date. Now we've got a small issue here with our button and our action that we're performing inside there. And what that's telling us is that we need to wrap our asynchronous call, because this is again happening in the background so that the user interface can keep updating. We have to wrap it in a thing called a task. So once we do that, it stops complaining. We can see our full user interface, our little date picker down at the bottom. When we tap on it, we get a series of dates, and we can go back. And we can pick a photo from any day in the last 100 days. So there you have it, a fairly fully fledged app. We've got some interesting interactions going on here and lots for our students to play with and learn from. Hope you enjoyed building this, and we'll see you again soon.